submission to the Federal Reserve. The great thing about Axiom is it does all this on one single platform. It gives you a lot of transparency, unlike a lot of typical IT legacy solutions where someone's creating code behind the scenes to do a calculation or mapping process. Here, everything's transparently shown to you from the data, from your source, all the way through to the end result of your calculation. On top of that, we wrap everything around with tight controls that allow you to control the access privileges, kind of what Maureen alluded to earlier with how they're able to put line item sign-off by different data providers, as well as the Axiom also preserves all your data and your submission to the regulators. On top of that, you also preserve the rules that were used to do that submission. A lot of times after you file, sometimes the Federal Reserve may come back to you and say, hey, listen, you have to do refiling because so-and-so doesn't seem to match out. So with Axiom, you can kind of take what was originally filed, preserve it, and then create a new snapshot of what the new submission would be. So all of that, the reason I explained this to you, I think it's really important to understand how the application works, because this will help you visualize when I talk about the Y-14 and how you can use Axiom to deal with the challenges of the Y-14. So if you see one of your colleagues running down the hallway looking like this, you know what they're working on. This is Y-14 report. And when we call it a Y-14 report, it's really more than just a report. There are monumental challenges to the Y-14, starting with data consolidation, integration, reporting burden, voluminous rules and calculations, evolving requirements, and then management controls. Here you're looking at retrieving data across many different systems and standardizing them, financial data, risk data, and reference data. To Maureen's allusion earlier about how the Y-9C report you can think of as almost like a family tree of a grandmother, here you're looking at that family tree with multiple generations. That's the size and scale of this report. The reporting burden is extraordinary because unfortunately the time frames as to when this report is due is also the same as your Y-9C, your call report, and everything else. So you have to kind of factor this into that process. The rules and calculations are, I'll call it voluminous because unlike the 9C and call report, we have clear instructions laid out for you. Here, everything's kind of embedded in the rule set. You have to go back to the regulatory documents in Basel II, Basel III, Dodd-Frank, and whatnot, and kind of look it up. The report instructions are very high level and kind of just reference the rules. If you have insomnia, I can send you a link to them. I guarantee you'll put you to sleep. The other thing to keep in mind too is the requirements are still evolving. The Fed's adopting these submissions based upon their supervisory needs. So what you see right now being reported in Y-14 may not be what you have to report 3 months down the line, 6 months down the line, a year down the line. That's still changing. Management controls becomes a challenge for this report as well because now you have to coordinate against many different business groups. You have to coordinate people from risk, operations, regulatory controllers, financial controllers, the whole gamut. And designing a process and controls as to how you manage all this is difficult, as well as establishing overall ownership. Who owns this whole thing? Who signs off on it? And then, of course, you have to deal with retention and refilings. You have to think about audit requirements as well. All of this kind of falls into the big gamut of management controls. So how is CCAR different from other regulatory reports? Traditional financial and regulatory reporting, you're able to get away with just using GL data, position data, and reference data. You're able to complete these regulatory reports like the 9C and call report and 2900 and whatnot with this level of information. How does CCAR change all this now? How does CCAR add an additional element of complexity? Now you look at Basel and Dodd-Frank added into the regulatory reporting world. Besides financial statements now, you have to think about taking these financial statements, your balance sheet, income statement, and capital, and now you're doing forward-looking projections. On top of that, you have to apply stress tests to these projections. And then you have to bring all that together and submit it as a report. The financial statement details that you used to have to submit, like breakdowns of loans and securities and whatnot, now you also have to think about calculating credit risk-weighted assets, market risk-weighted assets, as well as operational risk. In addition to activity-based reports like the ticks and whatnot, now you have to think about providing a report that looks at product-specific P&L sensitivities. You have to calculate deltas, gammas, and vegas across different product categories and measured up to a different index. So the scope of regulatory reporting has really grown significantly. Now it's just no longer a simple GL position data and onto a balance sheet type of regulatory report. The FR-Y-14 also announced or shows you the convergence now of financial reporting and risk management. Now risk management used to be something that was done as part of an internal business process to help manage your business. Now it becomes part of the regulatory process and it's under additional scrutiny. So how can Axiom add value to deal with these challenges? As I mentioned, Axiom is more than just a data mapping tool. If you choose to use all its functionalities, Axiom can be a data warehouse with visual business rules engine that can automate a lot of the calculations that you do in Excel and much more. Most everyone is kind of adapting. When you get new regulatory reports coming down the line, the immediate solution is to just think of something to do tactically, manually grab data from a specific source with some queries, put into Excel, and then generate the results that way. Some things may be more structured where you already have an existing process like risk calculations and whatnot. What Axiom can do is really kind of streamline all this for you, where we can use the data you already have in those automated processes and then kind of bring together and help you automate those processes that are Excel-based or manual-based and kind of bring all that into one big tactical and strategic solution that you can use until you find a more appropriate structure how you want to deploy it. Why is this necessary? The FR-Y-14 is, as I alluded to earlier, a very big report. It's really geared around the annual and semi-annual reports. These reports are basically where you're doing your projections of your balance sheet, income statement, and capital, and then doing stress testing on it. The monthly and quarterly submissions are all basically schedules that capture granular detail of what you submitted in the annual and semi-annual forecast. The reason the monthly and quarterly need is because the Fed's trying to track how your bank's performing against what you projected you would do. A lot of the data you use for monthly and quarterly can be driven off of the FR-Y-9C, core report, or even the 101. The challenge, though, is the data here that's needed is a little bit more granular. So you need to think about what you have for Y9C, how you report on Y9C, but then think about how to get more granular information. If you can do that and centralize in a single platform, you will achieve that dream of having everything in one place where you can reconcile all the data between what you reported on 9C, what you report on Y14, and whatnot. That's kind of what you're trying to achieve. So this is something that really, I think, Axiom can help you with. The following criteria. Bank holding companies have consolidated assets greater than $50 billion. That's what you have to, if you have that, you will be filing this Y14 report. The annual and semi-annual schedules are mandatory, so that's basically your projections and stress testing. The monthly and quarterly schedules are basically based on materiality thresholds. If you meet materiality thresholds, you will have to file them. If you don't, then you will be lucky enough not to have to file those pieces. There are 3 schedules on the quarterly that are mandatory regardless, and that's the pre-provision net revenue, regulatory capital instruments, and Basel III and Dodd-Frank schedules. Those you have to file regardless. But as you can see here, there's a lot of information that's being captured. And the time frames, like I said, they all fall into the same time frames you have to use for your regulatory reports. Semi-annual, you're looking at as of date March 31st, due to the Federal Reserve July 5th. Annual, September 30th, due January 5th. And so forth. And a quarterly falls into the same time frame as Y9C, and the monthlies are as of the last calendar day of the business month, due to the 30th calendar day of the following month. Very tight time frames for a large amount of information. So how can Axiom help? I think some of the things that we've mentioned earlier are the Axiom, you think of a tool that you need, or think of a solution that you can use to centralize all this data and business rules. That's how Axiom comes into play. The reason why I described to you what Axiom is it helps to explain why we can use it to solve this challenge of the Y14 report. The flexible nature of Axiom allows you to deploy it as both a tactical and a strategic solution. We can leverage data from your existing reports, such as the 9C Call Report 101. We can also leverage your existing processes that you already have in place and just pass the results through. For those processes that you are doing manually, we can help you automate that. That's the beauty of Axiom, where we can kind of take a nuts and bolts approach and kind of use what you already have in place and it's working well. We can fill in the gap on where you need help with in automating. All this can be brought together and then handled in terms of submission to the Federal Reserve. In summary, Axiom can provide you with an end-to-end comprehensive solution in a single platform. But wait, this is not the end of CCAR, unfortunately. I wish I could say this is it, you don't have to worry about it, and this is enough already, right? In addition to the bank holding company reports, you also have to file a Dodd-Frank stress test report to the Office of Control of the Currency. For those of you who have national bank federal savings entities, you're going to have to file this report. If you have total consolidated assets greater than $50 billion, the nice thing about it is this is referred to as the DFAST 14A report. This report is similar to the Y-14A that the bank holding company files, so it's the same structure. It's basically a granular view of your balance sheet, income statement, and capital, as well as some breakout details of regulatory capital instruments, Basel III, Dodd-Frank, operational risk, and so forth. So the report's very similar to the bank holding company one. The only difference is this is for the bank entity. If you think that you are off the hook because your total consolidated assets are less than $50 billion, make sure they're under $10 billion, because those of you who have greater than $10 billion in assets are still on the hook. The only thing is you would have to follow a smaller schedule, which basically consists of just the scenarios and the results. And the results are basically summarized projections and stress testing of your income statement, balance sheet, and capital. Enough data for the O31 report that we can use to satisfy the requirements of Y-14. The solution is very similar. You're able to kind of bring everything in one platform, make sure everything reconciles across all the reports, and then generate the submissions for both the O31 and the O41. I know all of you are out there looking for octopus you can hire because you figure 8 arms might be enough for you to do all these reports with one person. Unfortunately, it's not. I think strategically, you have to think about looking at a robust, adaptable solution that can help you put in tactical and strategic approaches, help you deal with change management with regards to the rules, the calculations, and the fact that the reports are still evolving as we speak. And it's also scalable, just because as your business grows, this reporting will have to grow along with it. You have to think about process controls. You have to find a platform that allows you to put in good process controls where you can make sure there's proper sign-off, review, reconciliation, and whatnot, and then also transparency. The one thing we always like to talk about with Axiom is transparent nature. You see how your data comes into the system from your source systems, runs it through data models, business rules, and then the output report. These are all critical to creating a long-lasting solution that will work for the Y-14. I hope my presentation helps you to understand how Axiom can be utilized. I guess we have some time for questions?
Yes, we do. We have 1 or 2 questions from the floor, maybe. Are you keeping your questions for the coffee break?
Everyone needs a break.
Maybe you do need a break. So should we just invite you to share your questions around coffee and beverages? Let's do that. And we'll see each other in 20 minutes at 4 o'clock. Thank you very much.